We are so privileged to be joined today, but not by not one, but two amazing guests this week. I want to make sure I introduce both James Warda and Theron Skees individually, and then talk about why they are here together today. James Warda is author of Where Are We Going So Fast? Finding the Sacred in Everyday Moments. He's written for the Chicago Tribune, Chicken Soup for the Soul, and Pioneer Press, and has contributed to numerous Disney publications and sites, including Celebrations Magazine, Disney Magazine, and WDW Magazine. He's a speaker and workshop facilitator, former adjunct professor at Loyola University Chicago, and a guest speaker for DePaul University of Chicago. A professional musician and a guitarist, I might add. On the side, James has served in executive communications and marketing roles for several Fortune 100 companies, a national nonprofit, and a number of advisory boards. Also want to introduce Theron Skees, who's founder of the Designers Creative Studio. He's a former Walt Disney Imagineer and creative executive with over 30 years of experience leading cross-functional teams in the themed entertainment industry for large-scale global projects. He is an international speaker, has presented for the Disney Institute, lectured for multiple organizations and universities, and is a workshop facilitator. He's guided a variety of companies from pharmaceuticals and design firms to e-commerce and retail in the art of story-based brand experience creation. Theron is a founder and member of the World Experience Organization and sits on several advisory boards. And they are here today to discuss a book that just came out and published called How does Disney do that? How Disney makes us feel and why it matters. It is a book that discusses all the reasons that Disney has such emotional and life-changing connections with us, and even provides some ideas how to apply those lessons to our work and to our lives. James and Theron, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having us, Jonathan. Really appreciate it.
It's our
That's great.
pleasure.
Thank you. I always like to start these conversations with our own Disney origin stories. So would love to hear how, each of you came to find love and work for Disney and, where you are today and how that journey happened.
Great. Well, I'm gonna hand it over to Theron because I often go first on these, but I'm gonna hand it over to Theron because he's got it's like a superhero origin story. So I'll just just to mix things up a bit.
Great. Well, my origin story started with Star Wars, right? So I was 10, saw Star Wars. I know our Gen Z fans, of course, and Gen Alpha would think of that as New Hope, the film, but that was the film that started it all. And I was a young 10-year-old sitting in the audience for multiple viewings, and I was like, I don't know what that is, but that's what I've got to do. So I pursued a career in film from the construction standpoint, designing, building, creating sets, sculpting, and did quite a few films and TV shows and worked quite a lot at it. And honestly was frustrated. I'm like, nobody gets to see how cool the sets are and how detailed they are. You just have to trick the 35 millimeter camera lens, and the audience goes on the journey as the director guides them. So I made my way into theme parks by working at Universal Studios in Orlando, helped build that base park, and eventually ended up in Paris working at Euro Disneyland. That was my first Imagineering job as a consultant, and I did all of the artificial rock work at Pirates of the Caribbean.
Which is amazing, by the way. I was just there. That is unbelievable. Skull Rock is something to see to be believed.
It's unbelievable. Yeah, that's actually my favorite part from a design perspective is Disneyland Paris. It's absolutely amazing. That was my foray into theme parks, and I just loved it. It was permanent. It's the same detail as film. It tells stories. People are immersed, and every guest is their own director, right? Their own hero in their own story. So I ended up working with Imagineering for 23 years, got to live all over the world and really be involved in some wonderful projects and have a really broad experience with many different things from attractions and hotels all the way through to cruise line. So that's kind of my origin story in 2 minutes or less.
That's amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, I always, whenever Theron talks about what he's done, I'm always like, what have I done with my time? It's like, my gosh. But as a kid, I liked Disney a lot. I did watch Disney, Wonderful World of Disney on TV and went to the movies and stuff. But I wouldn't say that I wasn't crazy about Disney. We never went to. I was up in Illinois. We never went to Disneyland or Disney World. Our big summer vacation was to the Wisconsin Dells. So there's that. But then when I got married, my wife started planning trips down to Disney World. And, we decided just that the best time to visit Disney World was in August. So we brought our 6-year-old son and our 17-month-old son down in August to Disney World. And I can remember walking around Animal Kingdom with my 17-year-old son on my 17-month-old son on my shoulders in August. So I figure if you can fall in love with under those conditions, then that says a lot. We then started going every, you can see it in the book that I kind of listed out. It's interesting. We went every few years, and then all of a sudden every year, and then all of a sudden you throw in a Disney cruise, and along the way I was a writer, but I started writing about Disney, more about, I was just, but not, not a typical kind of focusing on attraction so much, but the feeling that Disney gives us, and just really dove into Walt's kind of personal history, and again just was fascinated by this man who had failed so many times and then just persevered, and literally with his vision, and his love for his own kids, changed millions and billions of lives. And so that continued, and then 3 years ago, and maybe we can get to this, but 3 years ago it went from love to probably obsession, almost stalking. I think stalking Disney. So
That's great. I appreciate that. Great stories. So let's talk about the book, right? So how does Disney do that? The way I like to describe it is, it's not a book that you read; it's a book that you feel. I really do think that's the case, because you read it, and anyone that's a Disney fan knows, James, what you're talking about, Theron, what you're talking about. It's you visualize it, you feel it. How did the book came to be? How'd you two work together on it?
yeah, so then about 3 years ago, no, now it's, a little further than that now, probably about 4 years ago or so, and it was kind of, the pandemic was, I think, easing for a bit. Our son had moved down here, our middle son Matthew, to Orlando, and he called my wife and I, and he said, "Hey, I want you to come down, and we're going to come actually see you. We haven't seen you for a year because of the pandemic, and you have to go on these two new rides, Rise of the Resistance and Flight of Passage." And then he said something that I truly believe, if he had not have said it, we might not be here right now.
Hmm.
There might not be a book. Theron and I might not have met, but he said, "Don't watch any videos. Don't read about it. Don't watch any videos." He's a huge theme park guy. He travels the world going on coasters, and he said, "Just don't do it." It's okay. That's fine. So we came down, went on Rise, which is amazing.
The
You
best.
know, I
The
mean,
best.
I went in with all my Star Wars. Now, I didn't have the bond with Star Wars that Theron had, but Star Wars is important. But then we went on Flight of Passage, and I had seen Avatar, but I didn't have this like deep emotional connection with Avatar. I thought the movie was pretty cool. And so my son and I were in the queue, and there's queues and then there's queues, and that queue is just incredible.
Yeah.
And then we're waiting for, we're on our banshees, our mechanical banshees, and again, sound, and how important sound is in that moment, and as you're waiting. And I remember the feeling of, because I really didn't know anything about what was about to happen, and Disney does that really well. So I actually felt a little bit of anxiety, and it's like, well, which is great. And then the wall went up, and we swooped in to Pandora. And every time I tell the story, it absolutely never fails. I get goosebumps.
Yeah.
Goosebumps are starting right now. And I remember looking around, and it was just too much. I mean, I'm a writer. I had no words for it.
Mm.
And I remember looking around, and I'm on there with my son and stuff, and I remember 2 minutes in, I started to tear up.
Mm.
And I'm like, this is what? 57-year-old guy. Why am I tearing up? I'm crying on a Disney ride. and it's not Dumbo. And and then a couple minutes later, I realized I was feeling a sense of wonder. I was like, oh, wow. Okay, that's what that feels like. We don't get to feel that much as adults, right? And I remember then getting off the ride and walking out into the Florida sun. And I remember the moment, I remember exactly where I was. And I said, how does Disney do that in my head? And I didn't mean necessarily how did they do the rock work or what was the mechanism that was on the Banshee? How did they make it? It was, how did, who was it on the other side of that ride who started this whole thing, who had that kind of passion that was able to make me cry,
Hmm.
you know? So after that, I was writing at the time I was writing for the Chicago Tribune. I wrote a blog for them. And so I wrote about it, the experience, and it was about being turned into a 5-year-old kid again. And I'm like, well, I felt really weird pushing the send button on that one because it's like, are people going to be like, what? But like instantly, I started getting replies, over 100 replies, men and women saying we cried on this ride. We cried, and I cannot tell you how many people I have talked to in the last 3 years who cried on Flight of Passage. And so
I was
I thought,
wondering.
okay, yeah, I'm like, okay, that's interesting. And then a few weeks later, I'm watching the Imagineering story on Disney Plus. Leslie Iwerks, and I see the Imagineers talking about their attractions, and they're tearing up. It's like, what? Huh? And then a few weeks later, I'm on LinkedIn, and I don't get a commission from LinkedIn for saying this, but it's important. Disney Institute posted a video about Disney Springs, about who was behind the transformation to Disney Springs. And there was Theron, and he was great. I'm a communications PR person. So I was watching from that perspective, and he was just great on camera, told a great story. It was exciting, so I commented and I just said, hey, that's really something. That's really cool. I still actually have those messages. I posted it in one of our online groups, the actual messages where we connected. So I'll stop and I'll hand it over to Theron now.
Well, it was awesome. I mean, having my career change at Imagineering, right, during COVID, so many people got laid off. I was one of them. Ended up being the best personal career, professional career move ever. And I say that because I was a lot more open to people posting and people requesting. When you're an Imagineer, you don't really do that. I never did that because you end up with 6,000 people looking for a job. And I just couldn't field, all of those requests. So it just happened that I was more open. James wrote, and I was like, wow, cool. And, maybe we could collaborate. And that ended up with us just talking more and more. And pretty soon it was, hey, this is good. I agree, James. We should write a book. This is really cool. So literally it was, like you said, James, over 3 years of interviewing. I mean, we have hundreds of hours of this Zoom conversation back and forth, and that fed what you see today as the final published work.
And it's a very interesting format, right? Because it is personal stories, it's Imagineering insights, it's some self-help, and even some psychological theory. So how did that happen? It's unusual. It works extremely, especially for a book like this. It works extremely well. How'd the format come to be?
Can I
Yeah.
just interject really quickly,
Yeah.
James, before I jump there? I was just going to say, of all the books that are related to Imagineering, attraction experiences, and everything, I'll just say one thing that I think is really unique about it, and then James, you'll do a much better job describing it than I will. But what I find really unique, having been involved in other books and things about Imagineering, is this is the only book that I know of that actually is the conversation between the fan of a Disney attraction and experience and the group who actually creates that experience. And that conversation is so vital. And just the feedback that we've gotten so far really supports that idea. And I think that's the thing that really excited us was the uniqueness of that basis. So go for it, James. Sorry.
No, I was just getting, this is Jonathan, what you're going to notice here is that we obviously know each other very well.
By
I was
now, yeah.
actually just going to mention that it really evolved when Theron started to talk about this is really a conversation. And we said, this is a really cool conversation, but we shouldn't just be having it by ourselves. Let's bring everyone into this conversation, because how many fans would love to talk to the people who are designing these experiences? I tell Theron this all the time, and I still feel this. It's like we'd be walking around the parks as the kids were having as they were growing up. We'd be walking around the parks. I'd see an Imagineer, and it's like, whoa, it's an Imagineer. It's like seeing Springsteen. It's like, wow. So,
Definitely not that cool.
and something else really cool happened. Um, so I went to Theron with my question: how does Disney do that? And then I'll let Theron, if you wanted to share the question you told me that you guys had as Imagineers.
Absolutely. I think that's what is really great about the conversation is that from the fans' perspective, from James's perspective, it was how do they do that? How is that much emotional connection built into an attraction or a live entertainment experience? And what we discovered is that the Imagineer has the question and deep in their heart because for years, right? These attractions and theme parks, they take years. This isn't, a few months and it's done. It's 3, 4, 5 years. And during that time, there's so much work that the teams are focused on the guest. They're always thinking the guests will love this, and we have to, we're over budget, so we've got to, change, and we've got to pull this back, but we don't want to affect the guests. And at Imagineering, the projects are so tight. You finish a project, you go to the next project, you go to the next project. You don't usually get time to check in and see how the guests really appreciated all of the decisions and compromises and things that you did. So hearing from James made me ask the question, how do the guests feel about it? What are all of this effort that we put in? All of the projection that we thought the guests would love, getting that response is equally stimulating to us creatively and in our souls, knowing that the blood, sweat, and tears that we poured out had meaning, and that was the most fascinating thing about it.
So both sides itches are being scratched. James, you want to learn how it's being done. Darren, you want to know how it's being received. It's like a perfect yin and yang type of thing. When you were going through all this together, anything come up that surprised you? Any revelations that came up that just like wow, aha, wow moments?
I'm laughing because everything surprised me. Everything. This is where it starts to get a little metaphysical when I talk about the book, and because the book is meant to be more than just a book about an attraction. It's meant to be about something deeper than that. And there's so many coincidences that happened along the way. I mean, I had a question, and I happened to be connected to the person who also had a question, and we both had each other's answers. So that was pretty powerful. And then the other thing is, I wouldn't say I went through a master class of experience design, but I'd say I went through kind of 101 maybe with Theron, hundreds of hours, hearing about theme design, and it really made me realize that after completing this book, if I feel like kind of like a honorary Imagineer, because in many ways the book, as Theron tells me about what a project is like, that's what the book was like. Years to get to fruition, concept, blue sky concept originally, but it evolved. I didn't know the answer to my own question. That's the point. And the book really evolved. So did I know I was going to put in Maslow's hierarchy of needs? No.
I was just about to ask that. I was just about to ask how that, because that's like there's a whole different element of it.
I mean, I had no idea. And the book was originally going to be whimsical.
Yeah.
That's where Theron came up with all the major design of the logo and the golden age of Disney. It's a beautiful look. It was going to be whimsical, but as I was doing the interviews, it started to become something different. I mean, there's whimsical pieces of it, but there's some pretty, hard-hitting, compelling, thoughtful stories from people as I mean, I won't go into all the stories, but literally there were so many where each time I interviewed someone, there'd be a moment where I'd have a lump in my throat because I realized Disney meant something different. So yeah, lots of surprises. I don't know about you, if there aren't any surprises on your end.
Well, I just think it was really great that we started off with this conversation that was specifically focused around Disney and how it makes us feel. And we were, we were focused on that goal, but you can't help it when you start infusing all of these experiences from others on both sides of the conversation into the work. And as you're saying, James, you hear these things. What it really became was something deeper than do this and then do that. It's not a how-to. It was very much a deeper representation of how this emotional connection to a brand works. And what I was going to say is, I think that where we came up with was it goes beyond Disney, right? There's some real strong principles here about recognizing those joyful moments in your life and making connections, not just to things or to experiences, but to others. And I don't know, there was just some big, like as you said, metaphysical, some big questions, some big solutions that I think came out of the book that I certainly wasn't expecting.
Yeah, it's like one of them that resonated with me is growing down, right? Not just like growing up, but growing down, and how it's okay, no matter, men in their middle age-ish type things can be kids again. I mean, I try to be a kid as much as possible. My wife hates it, but I don't care because it makes me happy. It's like she takes care of two kids. She takes care of my daughter, she takes care of me. But I think it's important to be able to, the whole age is just a number thing. Disney lets people be young and happy and enthusiastic.
It's funny because I think we talked about Jonathan, we're both musicians.
Yeah.
And when I get on stage and I'm in the groove,
Mhm.
something happens where it's like, I'm a kid, I'm playing again, and I think the same thing, all the people I talked to, men and women, interviewed for, and there's one story in the book, Steve Barrett, who did the Hidden Mickey books. He's in there and a wonderful guy. And he was a doctor, he's a physician, and he also writes this long line of books that have done beautifully. And he told me his origin story was he didn't really know anything about Disney. He was going to a medical conference in Orlando. His wife and child were decided to go with him. His wife got a couple of Disney books. He wasn't really interested. Gave him one that was more kind of detail oriented. He read the book on the plane, and they got off the plane, and he said, "I'm not going to the conference." He went to Disney with them. Said he walked into the Magic Kingdom. He said when he got and he looked at the castle, he said his whole life changed.
Yeah.
And here he is, writing these series of books, and he goes back every week and he writes it, and he's a physician. So he talks to his, it's that's the power of this thing.
It is. And like I said, at the end of each chapter, you kind of ask questions, right? Not questions about how does Disney do that, but questions, what can we do to bring a little bit more joy into our lives, take some of these lessons? How'd you formulate those? That's a whole different level of kind of self-actualization.
Yeah, and that's so the the questions were really meant to um take what this experience that readers were having and help them make it their own. Because really that's the whole point of all this, right? It's like it's basically was, look, I just went on this thing that just really was amazing. I've got this big question. I really want to share this with other people. And when we all start sharing together, it's like there's a bond, right? Instant bond, like Theron and I, instant kind of, it just happened really quickly. And that's really important. I think that's what Theron was getting at, is how important that is, especially now that we realize how connected we all are.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Theron, please.
I'm just going to say absolutely.
Yeah.
That was the bigger story. And James, you say this so good. I don't want to take your thunder, but it's almost like if you say if Disney didn't exist, it was almost like it would need to be built so that it would serve the purpose or one of the opportunities to connect people globally, right? And I think that's so beautiful. And I know that a lot of that was captured in the book too. And we hope that people take that away as they read it, is that being connected in a group, right? You were saying growing down, and psychologically, as an experience designer, I would say that humans want to escape and play. And if they can do that with groups, that's even better. And so, this inherent desire to escape your world and into a fantasy world and just enjoy and play is so important. And Disney gives us permission to do that.
And it's funny, Jonathan, in the group, and we have two online groups, one on Facebook, one on LinkedIn.
Yep.
On LinkedIn, we talk more about it from a professional, like a brand and leadership. But I posted in our group today in Facebook, I posted something that said, two very important things happen when you go into a Disney park. I just posted that. I didn't say what those were,
Yep.
because tomorrow I'm going to say what I believe those are, because it came to me. It's like you forget and remember at the same time. You forget what's happening outside the berm,
Mm-hmm.
and you remember what it's like to play and just to be, and like Walt, I always say this, it's like Walt himself. And I say it in the book, you either remember what it was like to be a child, or you remember, or you really what you wished it would have been like to be a child. So like Walt didn't have, he didn't have the greatest childhood. And so, but instead of him taking that and turning it negative, he turned it into something where not only did he want to recreate that childhood for himself and his children, but for all of us. That's powerful.
Yeah. And you've done a good job, both you building a community on Facebook, and I'm a member of the Facebook group and love the questions. There's a lot of engagement. And again, it just goes to show the power. People want to talk about this. People want to learn about this. I think I recommend people not only buy the book, but join the Facebook group as well, because it's just a community of like-minded folks. It's positive, it's happy, and people just like to talk about this stuff.
Yeah, and it's been very intentional. The community, managing a community, and I call both of our groups together, or how does Disney do that? Community.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really call them groups as much as a community, and I really believe in that. It's meant to be very respectful. It's meant to be positive. It's not meant to be Pollyannish. So I'm okay if somebody says something, Disney's not perfect. Okay, yeah, right. I'm not, because if I wasn't okay with that, then it wouldn't be a sincere group.
Yeah.
But I still, there's many places you can go where you can get that kind of stuff nowadays, but you just want it to be, I wanted the groups to be like a park. You can just go in, forget all the other stuff, just play. And, Theron's a celebrity in the group anyway. So this would not have worked if I hadn't met Theron either. It would not have. It was something very important, because it had to be a fan, and it had to be a designer, or, but it also had to be somebody with the reputation and the credibility that Theron brings. So
That's great. You mentioned music, and again, this is a Disney music podcast, so would love to kind of expand this, to chat about music. Music plays an extraordinarily important part to the emotional journey, right? So would love about some insights that you have on, the music and music's role in Disney's success.
I'll just approach it. I'll approach it from the emotional perspective, which makes sense. And Theron has so much to add, obviously, from how the role music actually plays in all the different Disney experiences. As a musician, I know that if I I know my favorite guitar solo in the world.
What is it?
It's David Gilmour's solo from Comfortably
Comfortably
Numb.
numb. Okay, I got you. I'm with you. I'm with you.
And the reason that I love that solo so much is the first note. It's he bends a note that literally can tear your heart out of your chest. And like, you give me a great blues song. Music has, charms to soothe, right? But it's so emotional. It gets to you, I believe, even before words.
Mm.
It's probably like, smells, other senses, but it's such a powerful thing. And in fact, it's funny because before I got on the podcast tonight, I was talking with my wife, Gina. The book's dedicated to her, and that's for a reason. Not only did she start bringing us down to Disney World, but she's was such a big part of she was a big part of the size of the book.
Ah.
You know, she was my focus group of one. It's like, what do you think this book should be? And she said, well, it should fit easily in a tote.
Mm-hmm.
It should be a book that you could read on the plane ride home from Disney because you really want to relive it all. She's a big part of the look of the book. And so before I got on the podcast, I said, we're going to be talking about music, about music, songs. And she just instantly, because, she grew up with the Disney classic movies. And so if you just say the words, feed the birds,
Mm-hmm.
or you just say baby mine, or, that's the power of this stuff. So, but Theron, I don't know if you want to talk at all about the role of music.
Definitely. I would take it all the way back to that the theme park, the medium of a theme park would never exist unless it was from it took the art of filmmaking to actually make it happen, right? All of Walt's early Imagineers were filmmakers. John Hinch was, won an Academy Award for special effects for 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. So these filmmakers took the art of filmmaking and all of the layers of that communicate story and bring an audience into the scene and into the theme of the story and everything. And they realized that that was two-dimensional, and that when they extrapolated that story and created the medium of theme park, they had to do so in a three-dimensional way. And to do that, you ask yourself, well, what's the anatomy of an experience? And it's all these layers that contribute to an experience, somebody having an experience, a good experience or a bad experience. And certainly, music, audio is a huge part of that experience. As an experienced designer, we have to leverage all five senses because you never know what guest is going to remember or build a memory based on what sensory perception, right? Could be taste, could be smell, could be music, could be something visual, could have been the feeling that they had this, any of those things could build a memory. So you have to treat all of those in a consistent manner and tell the story with them to derive an emotional response. Music is probably one of the most powerful because it's the most powerful in film. It resonates and underscores the action that's going on, and it really helps to reinforce the story. We were talking a little bit, I think this may in fact be in the book, that when you enter into a Disney park, if you sit there and listen to the music, it actually the acoustics ramp up, right? The tempos and everything. It's that kind of thing because it is welcoming you into the space. And then in the evening, as people are leaving, it's a descending notes. And in a sense, that exits you out of it's the kiss goodnight. It's a natural flow. And there's so many. We could be on here for 6 hours talking about all of the visual aspects that follow the same kind of theory and same kind of application. But that's what I would say about music.
Yeah, that's great. And if you hadn't mentioned, I was going to say the one part in the book, and it hit me because I think a lot of it is very under, it's obviously psychologically impacted, but it just goes under the radar. You don't know it, but it affects you when you come in, like I said, Main Street, all happy ragtime. You come home, it's playing, Michael Giacchino's theme from Up, and it's kind of all chilled out. And why? There's obviously, it's beautiful, it's deliberate, but it's also it just resides right in your subconsciousness.
Absolutely. Well, a perfect example on the project that I led, Disney Springs,
Yeah.
right? I pitched the idea to the company. It had never been done before. I pitched the idea that every neighborhood at Disney Springs should have two music tracks, a daytime music track and a nighttime music track. And they said, well, great idea. Let's show us what that is like. And we gave them samples as to what that is because people will actually interact with that space differently at those different parts of the day. So during the daytime, you're shopping, you're dining, you're moving, and the beat is a little bit faster. I'm not a musician, so I don't know beats per minute, but it is a more rhythmic up tempo kind of a beat. All of the style of music there is a sort of a chill vibe sounding music, and then we flavor the music for each one of the neighborhoods, right? So it takes on the flavor and the character of that neighborhood. At sundown, when the light meter reads the sun going down, and then it actually changes tempo to something a little bit slower, a little bit more of a chill vibe, very cool kind of music in the evening. In the evening, you walk slower. You have a nice full tummy after dinner, and you're just kind of browsing. So, in a sense, that music underscores the and reinforces the way that we wanted you to experience the environment.
You mentioned before, it is very much a guide, right? And James, I know when you were speaking before, any park, you change lands, the music changes. When you go in a hotel, it sets the scene. So there are so many different ways that Disney uses music to your, and you know a million times more than I do, but it is kind of that theming sense. It's an oral theming, and not just a visual theming. So for me, and you walk into a place, we go to Vero Beach, James, I talked about Vero Beach. You come in, you hear that boardwalky type of music, and I just melt, and I'm just super chill and happy. And that's a very hard thing to do when I'm at Disney Park because I'm going a million miles an hour. But you put me in Vero Beach in like the main hall, hear the music, good night.
It's funny. As I was talking with my wife, I was just kind of listing out the different places that music and sound shows up. And I'll just share these with you, and then maybe Theron, you might have some other thoughts on this. But one of the most powerful places is at the beginning of the when you watch a Disney movie,
Mhm.
and that opening little sequence with the castle, and when you wish upon a star, right?
Yep.
You- all I have to do is see that, and it's like I'm just it's like a hypnotist putting me to sleep. It's like I'm now into the dream already. It's like because and I've got the sense memory of that now so much that as soon as I hear the music, I'm instantly transported into the world of Disney. I'm all of a sudden all those memories are kind of floating, hitting me. Um, when we live close to Port Canaveral, so we'll go out to Port Canaveral on a Sunday, my wife and I, and we'll watch the Disney cruise ships, go out. And when they go by and they do the horns, they do their horn sequence. And Theron was responsible for creative on the Disney Cruise Line, so he can talk to this. But when they do when they do their horns, and it's when do 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 again, bam, goosebumps. So so I'll stop there, and I'll just there and the horns and all that. Do you know where that kind of came from? I mean, that somebody actually thought of doing that is just that to me is fascinating.
It was created in the very beginning with the magic and the wonder, the very two first ships, and that was really defined as the character of the Disney Cruise Line brand. Anywhere in the world where those ships sail and the horn blows, it is an absolute differentiation. It doesn't matter what culture, what language you speak, when you hear when you wish upon a star, it can't be anything different. Other cruise lines, I won't mention them, have copied the names of the Disney ships,
Oh, lawsuit.
but I don't think that well, you can't really patent the name magic,
Yeah.
right? Or fantasy, even though those names are so intrinsic and so entrenched in the brand. It's hard to, it doesn't really work anyplace else. One other thing I was going to mention about music that attraction design, we think about a lot, and we think about. I was explaining this to James the other day. Is that we always think about two different groups of end users. I promise this will make sense. So you're designing an attraction, a ship, a hotel, something like that for guests. You immediately think, of course, you're designing for the guests, the visitors who will come in. But I would call them the second group of end users. The first group of end user that I would have my teams focus on is the frontline employee, the cast members. Because I submit to you, if you have a cast member who is in an uncomfortable position, they're listening to a very short loop of music and they're fatigued by listening to that music, and their function of their job, their reach envelope, whatever, is not designed very ergonomically. You're not, as a cast member, in the best frame of mind to celebrate your role in the show and to greet your guests, in this happy, like it's the very first time they've ever met you and they're very excited to do so. So by focusing on designing the environment that the cast members operate and work and live in and take breaks in every day, we always try to focus and make those really good for them. That would be my goal, right? Is to make that really good so they can bring that dimensional world to life for the guests. And a huge part of that is music. On the Disney Cruise Line, the music on the outer decks, that's several hours long in the loop. So that if you're out, and by the way, that doesn't really exist anywhere else, right? I mean, some of the attraction music, there's an hour here, there's an hour there that we would put in there, but you're just not staying in the land that long. You're certainly not staying in the attraction that long. But when you're on the ship, you're in a lounge chair with a book and a drink, and you want 3 hours or more of music so that you don't get fatigued sitting out there. So music can be a really good thing, but if it's not really thought through well, it can be a really bad thing.
Yeah, I was unrelated to Disney. I was sitting on a Delta flight and it landed and we were waiting and literally played, I timed it, a 45-second clip over and over again. And I literally said to the flight attendant, how do you handle it? And they're like, we just blank it out at some point because I would have lost my mind. I'd never be able to handle it.
That's really horrible.
Yeah.
Horrible. Yeah.
Uh,
You
know,
know, oh, go ahead.
no, James, please.
I was just going to say the other places that I was thinking about was, well, one was obviously the parks, and I was thinking about Epcot.
Mhm.
And two things about Epcot. First of all, my son, like I said, my middle son, he loves the park. He's there so often. That he knows all of the music. He knows all the soundtracks. And I'm sure most of the people listening to this, if not probably everybody listening to this, knows you can go and listen to all those soundtracks out on YouTube or wherever, right? You can listen to those soundtracks. And I know many people who, while they're around their house, have the Disney soundtracks playing from the parks. I mean, what that says to me is having a Disney soundtrack playing in your house makes you feel like you're at the parks, right?
Yeah.
And then I think about Illuminations and The Promise, when that would play at the end of the night, and it's like, that was a kiss goodnight, and that was a tucking you in bed, and that was a wow. So and then the live music there. I mean, one of my favorite bands is Moroccan when they played, and they played in Morocco, obviously. And then the Candlelight Processional, music is such a big piece, but also I was just thinking about sound. I know we talked, Jonathan, about sound,
Yeah.
and I was thinking back to my story of Flight of Passage.
Yeah.
I can tell you exactly what that pulsing sound sounded like before the wall went up,
Yeah.
and how that pulsing sound it made me more anxious, which I think is what it was meant to do.
Yeah.
It's like, so yeah.
I I also think, back to Disney Springs, you walk around and there's some IP music, right? Around, but I also think an important part of it, to your point, James, about live music is just being out listening to bands play, just that live interactive element. The
Mhm.
soundtracks is great, it makes it happy, but then when you hear live music, it's a whole new level of interactivity and energy. So it's just like it amps everything up.
Well, I'm like if my wife and I are downtown, and we're walking around and, you can hear some music in the distance and you go, is that live? And so as a musician, you listen and it's live
Yeah.
if there's fluctuations, if there's a little imperfection, something's different, a vocal is different and everything. And like you said, when it's live, it adds this new dimension to it. That's just I don't know, it just takes it somewhere else.
Yep.
If you think about the Disney Springs example that you just gave, that acoustic ecosystem, if you want to call it that, is so complex, so complex. So every neighborhood has a dual track, right, night and day,
Mhm.
and then within the neighborhoods there are live performance venues. Within those neighborhoods also exist restaurants that many of them have outdoor dining, and those outdoor dining or those terraces also present music. So balancing all of that acoustic environment and keeping it balanced is a huge challenge because, I mean, of course, as the Imagineering team, we left all the guidelines for the operator. It's the operator's team that does that well or does that poorly, and keeps that balanced. I'll just throw out one little gift for you on this one, Jonathan.
Please,
You said that
please.
Disney Springs has IP music, and you're partially right. The only Disney music that plays at downtown at Disney Springs is in the Disney Village because that's where the mass amount of Disney product exists is in the Disney Village. Now it's sprinkled throughout, but you go there and that's where you got your souvenir. That's where you have Lego. You have all those things. So we determined let's play our Disney music there. And in all the music that's ever been produced for Disney, of which there's a ton, and as Imagineers, it's great because you can just pull, I need this flavor of music, I need jazz, I need, all of these things, and I can do that. But did you know that in all the lexicon of Disney music, they didn't have any Disney songs in that sort of chill vibe? It didn't exist. So we hired 6 composers, and they took a whole bunch of songs that myself and the music team came up with, and they reorchestrated all of those songs to different styles. And so all of them that were created for Disney Springs there at the Disney Village, those are completely unique. They were never made before. We scored them, we wrote
I,
them, we hired the composers to make that music.
I'm so glad you said that because I was just in Disney Springs a couple months ago for a conference, and I walked from Saratoga Springs there, and I'm listening to the music, and it's like lo-fi kind of cool like Polynesian vibes or kind of
Mm.
like dance beat vibes. They all were very different. I was wondering what the reason was behind it. That totally makes sense.
We actually took a sample from each of the neighborhood's style. So like the landing, for example, is kind of a retro style. Town Center has a little bit of a Latin vibe, a little bit of samba going on. On the west side, it's a little more upbeat, a little more theatrical. So we mixed it up because we wanted just those different feels. And so we took each one of those musical styles of vernaculars and chose different songs and did a collection of them in the Disney Village, all with different songs. And my kids love, when we first opened, love to go there and sit in the Disney Village and guess what the songs were. Because they sound very, very different than
Very different.
the scored versions from the films that they're from. And so we kind of love that little challenge, figuring out what song was from what film.
Thank you for that. That is a great tidbit. And again, something you don't think about until you actually hear someone say it, then it registers. And James, to your point also about Epcot and Theron about the complexity of the sound systems, you walk around the world at Epcot, and I did this also. I actually posted a couple of videos of it. You walk from, let's just say, Italy to Germany, and the transition points are so seamless. Like it's so perfectly orchestrated that you leave one country, you enter the other, and the music just shifts perfectly. There's very little overlap. It works in all. It works from tone. It works from beat. It works for rhythm. I assume that's also a very deliberate, methodical design methodology that the Imagineers use.
100%.
Yeah,
The idea of transitioning between two different lands, or in the case of World Showcase, cultures, countries, the preference is not to do it with a hard wall and a bunch of signs. Now you enter. That's just not the way that Walt did it. So this sort of a lot of other elements. There's visual elements, change of concrete, change of texture, change of landscaping, scale differences, music differences, lighting differences, and all of those things subtly change when you transition like that. And I'll throw out another thing that'll be interesting, and you choose to talk about it or not. But we've been talking about theme parks, and when you think about the theme park, you think about this big open space with lots of land, no height restrictions, and you can really tell these stories very big. If you have a 40-foot oak tree, okay, great. 60-foot palm tree, love it. If you take all of that experience and put that on a ship, you have a very, very different set of rules regarding the environment. But you're dealing with the highest level of Disney fan that sails on the ships, and they're have a high level of scrutiny, a very high expectation. So how do you take that experience and put it on a ship, do those audio and acoustic transitions, but do them seamless without all of that air in between there? That's where it starts to get challenging.
that is super interesting. It's all about spatial design as well. I mean, you have space to work with, either a land or a ship or a hotel room, all need to be done accordingly. That's terrific. Um, we talk about the emotional impact of music. Would love both your thoughts. What Disney song, soundtrack, moment, what does it for? Either makes you super happy, super emotional. What are the things that bring the lump in your throat to you?
That's funny because that's exactly what I was talking about with my wife.
Yeah.
And we had just started getting into it. So, you know, there's certain there ones there's and the ones that bring lumps to her throat are not necessarily the ones that bring lumps to my throat. It's the same kind of thing. It's like you never know, like Theron was saying, you never know what's going to hit each person differently, not just from their senses, but from their life experiences and their
Yeah.
memories. And something triggers a memory in one person. So, I know with my wife and with many others, Feed the Birds is just so powerful, and Baby Mine from Dumbo.
Sure.
She brought up Beauty and the Beast and Can You Feel the Love Tonight? Um, there is a couple, and she if you at the end of Meet the Robinsons with Rob Thomas doing Little Wonders.
Oh, it's a good song. Yeah.
And she and my wife is saying, "What's that? A Disney song?" I mean, it's not really it, but it is. It's with a Disney movie. So, and for me, it's everything that I write about. Little Wonders is about moments. The one. I'll just finish by saying the one that I wouldn't have expected to say that you might not expect from a 6-year-old man is "Let It Go,"
Oh,
and I'll tell you why. It's not necessarily, I think it's a great musically. I think it's a great song. It feels a little polished for me, but so the reason I love the song is because I have memories of being at the beach club, waiting for the bus, and hearing "Let It Go" come on, and a little girl, we didn't know who she was, sang the entire song for us
uh,
in her princess thing. I just did a book signing at oh Pop Waffle and ice cream shop in St. Cloud down here in Florida. That's where the big book signings happen. But it was wonderful because all these little kids came in their Disney costumes, and two little girls were in their princess stuff, and they sang all of Let It Go. And so it's like, wow,
Yeah.
that's it. So yeah. So Theron, I don't know what your favorites.
It's probably impossible to track all the favorites, but the ones that come to mind right now is I really love the Oceans films, right? Oceans 11, etc. And I love that sort of Steven Soderbergh kind of approach to directing, and the music was fantastic there. So I'm a huge fan of the Incredibles music track, Michael Giacomo.
Yeah.
Amazing, amazing job there. I really it's so retro, it's so cool, it's fantastic. So from one perspective, I love that. Another one that really stands out to me, just because it has a lot of emotional attachment, is a song called "Married Life" from Up.
Oh,
It's that opening sequence that really goes through, the the whole life, married life of the main character there. And why it has a special significance for me is that sadly I lost a brother to kind of a tragic auto accident. My family and I were living in Hong Kong at the time, and we rushed home, and sadly there was nothing that could be done. But our whole family was together, and we were all kind of mourning together. And it is a good story, but it's sad. I said to my family, look, let's go to a Disney movie. Let's try to get cheered back up. So Up was coming out. I got tickets for everybody. We went to the movie, and that was the first song
oh my
that
God.
played in the whole thing. And it was just like every single one of us was, leaking like crazy, blubbering, and but the film ended up doing what we'd hoped it would, and livened everybody's mood, and then it helped us to share all of our memories and stuff. But that was the memory associated with that.
Yeah, it just goes to show how evocative music can be, right? It'll
Mm,
put you in a time, it'll put you in a time, it'll put you in a place, and everyone, like you said, James, everyone's got a different thing. So I talked about this a couple of times. The one that does it for me is at the very end of Coco, when he sings "Remember Me" to his great grandmother, and
mm,
I know I've talked about this before on the podcast, so forgive me, but it's a perfect reason to bring it back up again. I'm sitting there, and it's one of those theaters with like the big seats, and my wife and my daughter are together in the front, and I'm sitting next to a random woman to the left, and he starts singing, and her fingers twitch, and she starts smiling and singing, and I start ugly crying, like with next to a woman who must think I'm a psychopath. But it was, and to this day, I swear to God, every time it's on, like my family will watch me. He's like, it's gonna go again. And
he's
sure
gonna
enough,
blow.
every single time I can't help myself.
That is awesome. I'll share one more story that it just goes to show about coincidence, right?
Yeah.
I have a
Mm,
theory. It's not a well thought out theory yet, but I think Theron knows me enough to know that I'll just share my theories. But the what is it, the 7 degrees or 6 degrees of separation
Separation. Yeah.
yeah,
from
yeah.
Kevin Bacon? I have a theory that you're never more than 7 feet away from something Disney.
Oh,
Mm,
Now I haven't quite, but literally, and now anywhere I go. And this past weekend, my wife and I went to a air museum, airplane museum, and they had. My dad was in World War II. He passed away back in 2000, but he was in World War II. So we went to this museum, and they had a couple of really nice World War II planes, including the one that he was a navigator on.
no.
It wasn't the exact plane, but the
Yeah.
type of plane that he was a navigator on during D-Day. And my wife and I are there, and my wife's going, "I'm looking for a picture of your dad." So I don't think there's probably going to be a picture, which was, it meant so much to me that she said that. And and they had 40s, the music playing from the 40s, and there's an orchestra playing and stuff. And we're just walking around, and all of a sudden I hear an orchestra playing "When You Wish Upon a Star," and I'm like, "All right, what?"
Yeah.
And then we went in the big warehouse, and there was a C-47, which was the plane. We just happened to be there when one of the guides just happened to come in, started talking about the plane. It had been in D-Day. It had participated in the when we're having to drop food to Berlin, when West Berlin was behind the under, the Russians. And she said, "Do you want to go on the plane?" And I was, well, yeah. So we get on this plane, and she showed us where the 18-year-olds who were paratrooping that day would be hooked up to the line and have to jump out. And she brought us up to the front, and she said, "Why don't you sit here?" And I sat down, and in front of me were maps. And she said, "That's where the navigator would have sat." So, and my wife sat where the radio person would have sat. So there again, a memory like that.
Yeah.
And what did I hear? It's like Disney's literally everywhere.
It is.
Amazing.
It's amazing, and again, so powerful. And look, I know it's getting late on the East Coast, but I could talk to you guys for hours on end. But I do want to make sure. Listen, I want to again talk about how does Disney do that. I also want to bring special attention to the fact that not only you publish a book, but you also partner with Give Kids the World Village. Talk a little bit about how that happened and how a portion of the proceeds go to that, which I think is just keeping with all the amazing stuff you guys are doing and the goodness of Disney also.
Yeah, powerful. I'll try to make it relatively short, but I mean, it's such a thing to be passionate about. I didn't know anything about Give Kids the World Village until I came down to Florida, and I was driving past, in Kissimmee, and I'm just driving. And I saw this sign. I'm like, I don't know what is Give Kids the World Village. Brian Collins, a former Imagineer, who's in the book, he was working with them, and he told me about them, and I did, started to do some research. And this is founded by a Holocaust survivor, Henry Landworth.
Hmm.
He when he was a young boy, he was, most of his family he lost in the Holocaust. He's got a wonderful book they sell, and lost most of his family in the Holocaust. Finally got to Florida, happened to find his sister. So he grew up and he became a hotelier. He started running hotels, and he actually owned a hotel at Cape Canaveral. He became friends with the Mercury astronauts.
Hmm.
One of his best friends was Walter Cronkite. And he owned a Holiday Inn right near the Disney World. I don't know which gate it is. I think the East Gate. I'm not sure, but so he'd get all the calls of, "Hey, we've got a terminally ill, critically ill child who wants to go to Disney World. Can they stay at your hotel for free?" He'd say, he said, "Of course." And so he kept doing this. And then there was a young girl, and they were working on the vacation for her, and she passed away. And he said, he's, as they tell it, he said, "This is never going to happen. I won't let this happen again. There will never be a time that a child cannot go to Disney World or, down here because of all the logistics." So like they say, the next day he drove over to Disney. He drove over to Universal. He drove over to SeaWorld. He went to Perkins, and they all co-founded Give Kids the World.
Wow.
And he started in Holiday Inn, but then he needed more space. So he went to Kissimmee, and he found, acres of space. And I went and toured this place. Truly amazing. If you go to their website, it is like you've driven into a mini Magic Kingdom.
Wow.
They have and all of the the attractions are named after children who passed away, but the beautiful attractions they have. They have a beauty shop for little girls to have wigs, and get their makeup done, and all that. They have a theater with no seats. It's all movable seats and stuff, so they can bring in hospital beds, and Henry went to all these companies, and he said, "I want you to donate," and they all did. But he said, "Your name will not be in here anywhere." So when you go in, you don't see any name brands of anything. I mean, Lego created a whole room in there. They get, I think Kodak, there's a whole miniature golf course that's all wheelchair accessible. And they have villas for hundreds of families that can go there, and they give them week-long free vacations in Central Florida to any parks they want to go to, whatever, and they don't have to worry about a thing, which they've probably never had in their life, to not have to worry about things. And I'll just share this story with you. Um, so when I was touring, two things happened. Two important things happened. When I was touring Give Kids the World Village, there was a moment I walked out and there's this playground they have set up, and it looks like Candyland, but it looks like Candyland brought to life. And it was named after one of the young boys. And I stopped and I was speechless. And I felt like that moment on Flight of Passage. I was overwhelmed. I couldn't. I told the young guy I was with, I just have to stop for a second. I can't. I just can't. This is too much. And at the end, we went into their Castle of Miracles, I think it's called. And they give each child a star when they first get there. And during their stay, they decorate it. And then they leave the star when they leave. And they put these stars up on the castle walls. And they have a huge tower and they put them up there. And you walk in, I'm getting goosebumps. Yeah. You walk in and you see all these stars. There are over 120,000 stars.
Wow. Wow.
That have gone through there. That's the child star. All those families, all those siblings. And they say one of the most powerful moments is when those families come in and see all those stars and they realize, they've been isolated for so long. And they're like, wow, we're not alone. So, I got connected with them. We have a fundraiser through our How Does Disney Do That website. And then a portion of the proceeds will be going to them. So it's just, and many people in our groups, many Disney people, there's such strong connections between Disney and Give Kids the World. Many people volunteer there. I remember the Osborne lights.
Yeah.
So the Osborne lights, when that was retired, I forget what year that was retired from the studios, but they already had lights for the coming year or two. Those lights went over to Give Kids the World. Wow. So a lot of Give Kids the World, they have their own light show. A lot of those are like the Osborne. Yeah. So it's just, yeah. So I don't know if there's anything you want to share from being down here in Florida.
Oh no, you covered it. It's such a intrinsically linked to, I think, all the theme parks, but specifically to Disney. And Disney had crews of volunteers that would go there all the time to do everything from just touching up the paint to they have some pretty technical attractions and experiences there, to tweaking those and keeping those going and keeping that magic alive. And it's an important important thing for us to be involved in, for sure.
And one last thing, when I was being toured through there, the young guy pointed to this thing called Starlight Scoops. It's their ice cream shop. One of the biggest attractions for the kids, they can get ice cream any time of day. So that place is open 24 hours a day, and they're told, they get up in the morning, they get a gift, and all their siblings get a gift. Each day they celebrate a different holiday, and they can go get ice cream whenever they want. And I was told that was the only building that the Imagineers and Universal worked on together. And it was the one place where they had both worked together on a building.
Amazing. Just amazing.
Nice.
I not only should you read the book and you should feel the book, but also it goes to a great cause. So thank you guys so much for doing that. And, in addition to reading the book or buying on Amazon, wherever books are sold, how else can people follow you and learn what you guys are doing?
Yeah, thank you. I think at the end of the book, there's a section that tells you how you can stay connected to us. I would say, most, you get to the end of the book, you're done reading, and you get this feeling of like, wait a minute, I don't want it to be done. I want to have a conversation. So I would suggest to readers that they go and they join our groups on Facebook and on LinkedIn. I would join both because it's a different kind of feel in both. You can follow us on Instagram. You can go to our website, howdoesdisneydothat.com. You can submit stories there for future books in the series. The next book in the series is going to be focused on cast and crew members. And if you happen to notice on the cover in the Starburst, there's 8 colors in the Starburst. Theron Skees, a wonderful designer you might know of, created this logo. And there's 8 colors in the Starburst. So one might assume that there's going to be 8 colors, 8 books in the series that might look really nice on a bookshelf all together. And there are rumors that there will be a workbook that goes along with this book where you can apply it to your own life and your own work. So, and then Theron, ways that people can kind of connect to your work, especially, I'll just say this and let Theron finish this out, is that you asked about surprises. I really did believe Disney fans would really like the book. I felt that way. I thought industry, the design, the themed industry would like it, students and professionals. I wasn't quite sure how much. I think Theron had a better idea, but we have seen such a strong response from the design and theme industry. So I don't know, Theron, if you want to talk a little bit about that, especially like your requests from around the world, and then how people can connect with you.
Definitely. That was a really happy moment to see that creators of experiences wanted to participate in the conversation as well. So we've gotten some really nice written feedback from the groups, many different students, new professionals, old professionals like myself who have been around the block for a while, joining the groups and commenting, and that's just been really tremendously rewarding to see that, because it's about a conversation, and a one-sided conversation is kind of boring. So having everybody participating is really fantastic. For me, LinkedIn, Instagram for sure. My website, my company is the Designers Creative Studio. So if you look that up, I've got a website that can talk about some of the things that I do, my origin story, my journey, and you can get a look at some of the projects I've worked on as well.
And Jonathan, to what Theron was just saying, we had a response that was really powerful. Just to illustrate this, Frank, I get the name wrong, Steckelberg, a engineer with Intamin,
Hmm.
right? And so
Roller
Intamin
coaster
is one of the
engineer.
leading world's designers of coasters and everything. He sent a quote. He sent a comment to Theron, and then he sent one to me. And in it, he said, Remember, this is an engineer." And in it, he said, at one point in the book, he got very emotional because it reminded him of why he does what he does, and that it's for these people who are having these experiences. So when I heard an engineer got emotional, well, I mean,
You're right.
It's
Yeah.
tremendous.
I don't want to stereotype, but
Yeah.
that said a lot to me. So
Yeah,
Again,
definitely.
like I said, it's not a book you read, it's a book you feel. I truly believe it. I loved it. I heard about it, I read it, I got it as soon as it came out, and I was so excited to be able to chat with you guys. And I'm so pleased you guys joined. Would love to, again, I could talk with you guys for hours, but with each of those 8 books come out, come back on. We'll talk about each one of those 8 books and the workbook. Would love to have you. Go to Amazon bookstore. If your bookstore doesn't have it, ask them to carry it. How does Disney do that? James and Theron, thank you so much for your time. It was so great chatting with you.
thanks, Jonathan. Had a great time.
All right.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
You do. Okay.